if he can flip more members. What I can also say is that he's unlikely to get much cooperation from Democrats. I also spoke with the former Speaker, now Representative-elect Nancy Pelosi, who said that Democrats have no intent of voting present. That would be another tactic potentially that could help McCarthy in terms of lowering the threshold or the majority that he needs to be able to secure enough votes, because as you know, it is a vote by name where each member has to say a name in terms of who they support for Speaker, which is how the votes are cast. And so if somebody votes present, then that takes away from that majority that is needed and kind of lowers the threshold. So McCarthy wouldn't necessarily need that 218. That number would be lower. Some members vote present, yes.
Remind us then, we adjourned last night in the 5 o'clock Eastern hour, much to the surprise of everybody up here, when the no vote against him went from 19 to 20. He realized the math was starting to get more complicated. What has transpired then? What has he been trying to do since about 5:45 yesterday to peel away at those 20 that are voting against him?
Well, we know that there have been a number of informal talks that have been going on, that went on yesterday evening right after everything adjourned here in the House. And so as a result, consequently, just trying to see who else is coming by. This is now Nancy Pelosi, who's getting ready to pass by.
Yeah, we'll keep the shot on you, Nicole.
Let's go back to that shot.
Go back to that shot as we...
She's actually, I think, talking to our Bob Costa at the moment. But earlier, what I will say is that she said that she believes that there should still be some type of ceremonial swearing in, perhaps the dean to swear in some of these new members, so at least their families could get home while this whole process is being sorted out. She thought that that was the best way to kind of resolve the situation, knowing that this could take some time. And as I mentioned earlier, she told me that she does not feel that Democrats...
House floor, where Cheryl Johnson is
upon the election of a speaker. The tellers will please come forward to take their seats.
Hey guys, we got what's happening? George. We got tellers.
So it appears they are preparing for round 4. We'll see if some member tries to step up and suggest that they hold off. But for now, at least, she's calling for what they call formally the tellers, but literally are people from both sides of the aisle. As you see, they're setting notebooks on the first level of the dais to keep score and to try to tally the votes.
And you see Kevin McCarthy is now on the floor. You can see him towards the bottom of your screen there.
Just above the word speakership.
Just exactly, a title that he would very much like to have and is very much elusive at this point. And as you mentioned, we have Cheryl Johnson, who is effectively leading the House right now. And just to remind our viewers that you need a majority of the members in this chamber. So even as you're kind of watching these votes, you would notice that Hakeem Jeffries was at times getting more votes than McCarthy. You still need a majority to get that number. And we should also note that the group of defectors that we've been talking about, as again talking to a Republican lawmaker today who was making the point that they're not all asking for the same exact thing. So it's actually very difficult to negotiate with them because they're not a monolithic group, essentially. They have lots of different kinds of demands. And as we were talking yesterday, some want to stick it to Kevin McCarthy, some just don't like him. And here you see him shaking hands with members of his conference.
Yep. Work in the room. This is one of the things that colleagues who voted for him say he's very good at, developing relationships. He is literally a backslapper, somebody who remembers your wife's birthday, somebody who invites you to go on a bike ride with him here around D.C. to get exercise. somebody who has raised millions, tens of millions of dollars for his colleagues across the Republican ideological
including
spectrum.
those who voted against him yesterday.
Exactly.
And he, in his old position several years ago, was the Republican whip, which meant that he was in charge of counting the votes, getting the votes for pieces of legislation. And that is essentially how he rose to this role, as you mentioned, having those relationships. Here he's talking to Tom Cole, longtime member from Oklahoma and an ally of leadership. Nicole, you've been staked out outside the chamber this morning. You were there all day yesterday. Can you give us a sense of the atmospherics? Are you getting the sense that Republicans are essentially growing fatigued, that they want to get this over with and move forward, or do you think that we will be here, essentially for a while? We're calling it roll now.
I think it depends who you talk to, really. Quite frankly.
Nicole, hold off again. I'm sorry.
We're going to hear from Mike Gallagher.
Rise to nominate the gentleman from California, Mr. Kevin McCarthy, for Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Okay, so they're going to try again. So Nicole, you should, in essence, they're going to start this process again. As they begin this nomination speech, Nicole, you should finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the atmospherics that you asked about, I mean, I think it depends who you talk to. I think in terms of those 20 who opposed Kevin McCarthy yesterday, I think many of them feel emboldened. And, I spoke with one of those hardliners, South Carolina's Ralph Norman, who made very clear that, he thinks that this is a process where Kevin McCarthy should be vetted, and he thinks that some time should be given to this, quite frankly. So I think you do have some who feel that this is merited, that this is warranted, but then you have other more moderate members who feel like this process has been taken hostage and that they need to get on with the people's work. And even Democrats are starting to express some frustration about that, saying that this is causing problems in terms of their ability to be able to appoint members to committees and to be able to carry out constituent services. So it is wearing on some members, but others, again, are more emboldened and willing to ride the process out for as long as it takes.
All right, let's listen to Congressman Mike Gallagher, Republican of Wisconsin, national security background, popular telegenic figure for the party. Many see him as a rising star. He today, for the fourth time, nominating Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker.
I say that because I know last night people were frustrated. They wanted to go to parties. They wanted to take pictures with their families. But honestly, we find ourselves here in this chamber for the second day, and we know we got work to do. But in some ways, there's no place I'd rather be. With the possible exception of Lambeau Field on Sunday, no place I'd rather be. But maybe with the excitement, some of you hadn't had an opportunity to check what's happening online, let me fill you in, or what's happening on Twitter, what the press is writing about. In some ways, they're salivating. There's headlines about the chaos, this and that. Yesterday, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle were tweeting their bags of popcorn that they had out. They love it. The schadenfreude is palpable. But I think my friends on the Democratic side misunderstand what's happening here. Sure, it looks messy, but democracy is messy. Democracy is messy by design. By design. And that's a feature, not a bug of our system. We air it all out in the open for the American people to see. Because at the end of the day, the president's not in charge, the Supreme Court's not in charge, the Speaker of the House is not even in charge. The American people are in charge. And I'm proud to be part of a party that welcomes debate, that invites different views, that isn't afraid of that. Now, I listened to some of my colleagues yesterday. Mr. Roy from Texas, my good friend, he knows I respect his views. I have been his partner in anti-proxy voting crusades, pro-regular order crusades. I understand. I know that his intentions are pure. I know a lot of people are just frustrated with the way Congress works. But, and Chip, you know I believe that in my bones. nobody has done more to lay out a plan for how we restore the basic functioning of this institution than Kevin McCarthy. Nobody. Nobody has done that. Now, you may not have gotten everything you wanted. There are things I want that I know it's just not possible to get done in this Congress. But Mr. McCarthy has gone above and beyond in terms of listening to people with concerns and laying out a plan for how we restore the basic functioning of the House of Representatives. Furthermore, I believe no one has done more to bring us into the majority than Kevin McCarthy. Listen, I wish we had a bigger majority, right? I wish we could do everything over the next 2 years, but the American people gave us an opportunity. They gave us, Republicans, an opportunity to inject some basic common sense into the federal government, to pull the emergency brake on a lot of the crazy we've seen in the last few years. They're asking us to do a job, and nobody has laid out a plan, a proactive policy agenda for the direction we want to take this country in more detail than Kevin McCarthy. You all had an opportunity to provide input into that plan. And the irony of this current moment and this debate we're having is that on the big stuff we all agree, right? We want to secure the border. We don't want the executive branch to do everything through a pen and a phone. We want to work with our Democratic colleagues when it comes to standing up to our enemies abroad, right? There are basic things we know we need to do. It is time to get to work. So you might tweet out some more popcorn emojis. I get it. You might write your headlines. But what I see right now is energy. A tremendous amount of energy in this Republican caucus who want to do the work of the people. Mr. McCarthy is not asking you to endorse business as usual in the House. He's laid out a plan to renew the House of Representatives and once again make it an institution that we can credibly look ourselves in the mirror and say, we are working in the people's house. For that and many other reasons, I nominate Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House.
Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin putting a positive spin on the situation facing the Republican conference.
What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Clerk, I rise to nominate Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of this House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Clerk, make no mistake, there is no frustration on our side. We are focused on serving the American people. In order to do that, we have to unite behind a speaker, and Democrats are united behind a speaker who prioritizes putting better-paying jobs in industries of the future. Growing up in a working-class family, he knows that a good-paying job and a good education are key to economic mobility. He knows that to tackle the affordability crisis in this country, we need to make sure that everybody gets paid enough to live and work in any zip code. And he knows that by creating these jobs, we can once again make it in America. Madam Clerk, as chair of the Democratic caucus, I am directed by that vote of the caucus to present for election to the 118th Congress the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, Representative-elect for the state of New York, for the office of Speaker.
Democrats doing what they've done 4 times already. They've had their number 3, Pete Aguilar, nominate their number 1, Hakeem Jeffries. Now, who, if anyone else, might be nominated? Let's see.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
I seek to place a nomination for Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Yesterday, my first vote for Speaker of the House was for Byron Donalds. Today, I'm rising to nominate Byron Donalds for Speaker of the House of Representatives. Byron.
And so you are now hearing from Chip Roy, who's a congressman from Texas. He was one of the 20 who voted against McCarthy yesterday. But what's significant about what he's doing now is he is nominating Byron Donalds, a Republican congressman from Florida. And this shows there has been a shift away from coalescing around Jim Jordan. We saw the first vote yesterday. These 19 defectors at the time had voted for a variety of different candidates. Then we saw them throughout the next couple of ballots coalesce around one alternative, Jim Jordan of Ohio, who does not want the job, who will chair the Judiciary Committee. And now you have Chip Roy nominating Byron Donalds. So this shows somewhat of a shift from yesterday. Let's continue.
And Chip Roy just said, we'll go back to him in a moment here, Byron Donalds is black. Chip Roy says now, for the first time in American history, 2 black men have been placed in a nomination at the same time to serve as House Speaker. Let's listen.
However, Madam Speaker, order. Madam Clerk, order. We do not seek to judge people by the color of their skin, but rather the content of their character. Byron Donalds Byron Donalds is a good man raised by a single mom who moved past adversity, became a Christian man at the age of 21, and has devoted his life to advancing the cause for his family and for this country. And he has done it admirably. But there's an important reason for nominating Byron, and that is this country needs a change. This country needs leadership that does not reflect this city, this town that is badly broken. The House of Representatives is the people's house. It represents the entirety of our country, and we each represent some 750,000 people. And we come here, and here we sit in a room filled with those representatives. And my friend, Mr. Gallagher, and he is my friend, and I agree with him on many things, and I agree with almost everything that you were talking about. But we should be in here having this kind of a conversation with this many people in the room about Ukraine. And we should debate the merits, and we should debate the ups and downs of being involved. We should debate the $45 billion. We should debate whether it should be more or less. We should debate whether it should be paid for. We should debate what the result we should demand. The only way you're going to get that is if you change the rules and have the leadership to advance the rules to make sure that we can do that. Now, we've had a conversation for 2 months to try to advance the ball, and we have had success in doing that. But we're not there. We're not at the place where we need to be to guarantee that we're going to be able to stand up in the face of the swamp that continues to step over the American people on a daily basis and spend money we don't have.
For those of you wondering, yes, that man in the yellow tie is Byron Donalds, who's just been nominated by his colleague Chip Roy as a third option here. Donalds was the 20th member yesterday, Republican member, to vote against McCarthy, and in interviews today was suggesting he'd be persuaded to vote for McCarthy or the larger bloc's preference if there was a plan moving forward. So far in this hour, there doesn't appear to be a new plan, because the initial plan we thought was that they would adjourn quickly, try to go back and cut a deal and avoid this floor fight, which continues.
And so we'll be keeping an eye on who Donald's supports, because if this coalition of 20 holds today, McCarthy's issues remain, and there will have been no progress made.
Do you think they want us to continue down that path? And the argument that I would make is that they want a new face, new vision, new leadership, and I believe that face, vision, and new leadership is Byron Donalds, and I'm proud to put his name into nomination, and I yield back.
The reading clerk will call the roll.
Okay, so round 4 is now underway. They will try again here with 3 options: Kevin McCarthy, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat from New York, and Byron Donalds from southwestern Florida. Of course, one thing to watch for is if any member on either side votes present. And the reason that matters is because you could conceivably drive down the total number of votes needed to win the majority of, if that makes sense to you at home. This is tricky. But in essence, if a handful vote present and a majority of the votes cast by those remaining went for McCarthy, he could win that way. It's messy. It wouldn't be a majority of the House, but it would be a majority of those that voted in this round, the 4th round of voting for Speaker.
And that's where you get into very tricky territory there, because remember, Republicans have such a narrow majority in this new Congress that if enough vote present, I mean, that could give an advantage to the Democrats. And that's an argument that McCarthy has been, trying to make over the past 24 hours, which is that without a clear plan from this group of 19 or 20 defectors, you could end up giving the speakership to Democrats and losing the House altogether. Now, that is a long way away, but again, you need the majority of those voting for an actual person.
Bacon. McCarthy. Baird.
And
McCarthy. Balderson. McCarthy.
And Ed, another point that a Republican lawmaker was making to me earlier today was that McCarthy has the support of 90-something% of his conference.
Yep.
So we are looking at a small number of defectors here. And so this lawmaker who's supporting McCarthy was essentially saying, look, why should he back away at this point? Because he has the support of most of the conference.
But you don't just need this.
Exactly.
Right.
So that gets us to the fundamentals of today that, that clearly, now that we're 24 hours into this, doesn't get you those votes. But that does show why he is not backing down at this point. But just to note again, we haven't seen any significant movement from these defectors towards McCarthy.
And we also haven't seen any significant conversations we're aware of at this hour between Republicans and Democrats about possibly finding a compromise candidate, a moderate member who's currently sitting in either party, maybe somebody who just retired. Because remember, let's throw another wrinkle into this. The rules of the House are that you don't actually have to be a member of the House in order to be Speaker.
Well, in that case,
it's similar like being Pope. You actually don't have to be a priest in order to become Pope.
Oh, see, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's one of those quirky rules. They could come up with anybody as a potential compromise. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's certainly where the roadmap leads them. If for some reason this were to go on for a while, you would probably see a handful of deals cut between the two parties, and and then we'll see.
I should clarify, I didn't know that about the Pope. I very much knew this about the Speaker, because every time this comes up, people throw out these kinds of, fan fiction ideas. But we are, as we've been saying, we are in a different time right now. We haven't seen this in 100 years. So, while that is still a far-fetched idea, it's an idea nonetheless.
We should remind people, especially if perhaps you weren't paying as close attention yesterday, or you need to be reminded because you've been talking about this with friends and coworkers. Last time this happened was in 1923. It took 9 ballots before they settled on re-electing Speaker Fred Gillette of Massachusetts. You think that's a lot? You go back to 1856. It took them 163 rounds of voting before they elected Democrat Nathaniel Banks. It took about 2 months, right?
2 months, yes.
So, you know, there's precedence for this in congressional history. We just haven't had it in modern electronic media history, that this kind of stalemate has occurred. We should point out also, there has been commentary on this situation for the first time this morning by President Byron down the street at the White House, who was asked before he flew to Kentucky what he makes of this. And he told reporters he thinks it's an embarrassment for Republicans, and he's hoping that they can get on with it quickly because there are things the country needs to do, and the world is watching. And he believes that at a point where we remain the largest developed economy in the world, and when we're in the midst of an economic rebound, the House needs to be better organized, and then, you know, the business of governing can proceed. I was there this morning on AM duty at the White House, and I asked him, I said, how concerned are you about the ability of Congress and the White House to govern if this goes on? And he said, no, not for me to govern, for them. Essentially saying, I'm doing my job, they've got to figure out theirs.
And what is Biden doing today? He is going to Kentucky with the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, to talk about a new bridge in Kentucky. So continuing the work there. We want to go to Scott McFarlane, who is joining us on the phone. He is, of course, our congressional correspondent. Probably hasn't gotten much sleep over the past 24 hours and has been filing from inside the chamber. He's been inside the chamber, that fly on the wall for us. Scott, what are you seeing and hearing? What's notable today that you may have not seen yesterday?
The group of approximately 20 GOP opponents of Kevin McCarthy seem to have synchronized their choreography a bit here on the House floor. They're all sitting together. They did standing ovations and hoots and hollers that were synchronized when the nominating speech was just made for this alternative to Kevin McCarthy, Byron Donalds of Florida. They seem to be working in unison, which may help the theater of this alternative candidacy, but doesn't change the reality of it. There doesn't seem to be any one singular concession or thing Kevin McCarthy could do to bring all of them, or 16 of them, back into his fold. They may be sitting together and speaking with one voice on the House floor, but I don't think they're speaking with one voice when they go to Kevin McCarthy asking for things. There's a diverse set of criticisms this group brings to the table. For example, you just heard the speech from Chip Roy of Texas as he nominated Byron Donalds. Chip Roy, for the second consecutive day, had a complaint about the proceedings on the House floor, and that he wants a leadership change to change how votes and debates are held. Matt Gaetz has a different concern, calling McCarthy not trustworthy. There are others who say he's not conservative enough. So there's a diversity of complaints, which means there's no silver bullet Kevin McCarthy can fire to bring enough of them back, at least not at once.
As we continue to watch the vote here, one of the dynamics you see at the front of the room, and I don't know if we can go back to that wide shot of the dais, but the reading clerk is going alphabetically through all members who are here. And then on either side in the front of the room are 2 scorekeepers from each side, in essence. And then at the end of the vote, they all confer with the clerk's office to make sure that everybody's math is consistent before announcing the final result. This is a fantastic shot that they just installed. This is an overhead camera in the chamber looking directly down. So those folks there just behind the main lectern are the ones keeping score for either side. One of the dynamics of this situation we're in is that currently there are no formal rules of decorum or otherwise of the House of Representatives. And so one of the things that this means is that shot, for example, and some of the more intriguing shots you've seen here on our coverage and maybe on social media, in that we as news organizations through C-SPAN, which of course is the nonpartisan congressional television service, have full editorial control of the camera shots right now. The moment a speaker gets appointed, the electronic media goes to the House and says, we'd like to keep editorial control of your cameras. And they say, no, you can't. So we're getting good, intriguing looks inside the room today. But once formal House business begins and there's a new speaker, it's likely they're going to take back control of these cameras. And we won't necessarily get to see all that intriguing body language and these good shots that we've had. So far, Byron Donalds appears to have 6 votes in support of him, which means that Never Kevin block of 20 is already at 6. That's a signal already that it may be mathematically difficult for McCarthy to make it, unless a handful suddenly vote present. But Nicole Killian, I believe you're still with us. You were pointing out, what, say that again, sorry? Sorry, back to Scott. Scott, one of the dynamics we picked up on this morning is that Democrats are expected to hold firm and united behind the idea of continuing to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, all 212 of them, and that by holding together as a bloc, they're going to rob McCarthy of the potential to drive down the total vote count or to cut a deal with certain moderates and get himself the speakership. And that prolongs this process even more.
Yeah, and they've been unequivocal, Ed. They're going to stay with that. I mean, they recognize every minute that goes by and every hour that goes by and every vote that goes by. It minimizes the next future Republican speaker, potentially the authority he or she will carry in the Republican conference and the impact of this House majority. The longer they string this out, the better positioned the Democrats are for the next 2 years. They recognize that. It's the Republicans, though, including Don Bacon of Omaha, talking openly about the possibility they're going to have to make overtures as a party to the Democrats to get some votes from them for McCarthy or a consensus candidate. And Bacon told me they're going to have to make some big concessions to Democrats to do so. Perhaps committee seats on powerful committees, perhaps changing what we call the ratios up here, how many Democrats are on each congressional panel. Democrats are in a particularly good negotiating position at this moment and may ask for far more than that, although any Democrat that entertains that idea publicly runs the risk of getting shouted down from the rank and file in his or her party. So it's a delicate situation there. But those conversations are increasing in volume and in frequency. Just doesn't seem like they're increasing in reality.
Yeah, and Scott, that's a good point, because even if we do reach some kind of conclusion, whether it's today or tomorrow or weeks from now, the problem for whomever becomes the speaker remains, which is that wrangling votes for any piece of legislation is going to have to face these kinds of hurdles. Scott, we're going to toss this back to Errol and Lana back in New York. We're going to keep an eye on this vote here in Washington, and we'll check back in with you all very soon once we have some more votes here.
All right. Thanks, Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns. I hope that you are wrong about tomorrow or next week. We are going to continue to check back in with you at the Capitol when we have results of this latest vote. And we are going to take a quick break now.
That's right. And a fascinating point made by Ed that I want to emphasize is we're getting these cutaways and these other shots because no Speaker of the House is in charge of telling the cameras what to do. So if you stay with CBS News and you head to our second stream where you're watching this live, we truly are witnessing things we haven't seen in the modern age. People from opposing parties coming together and chatting with each other, too, just in the B-roll, which I was really surprised by. Stay right where you are. We're going to continue to cover this, of course, until there's a resolution. You're watching.
We also have additional news, too, just in case anybody wants to know. It's not just what's happening in the Capitol, though, as you say, Errol. This is history in motion. But do stay with us.
We'll be right back.
McCarthy.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression.
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app. when weather turns extreme.
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become